Hello, welcome to the People Profit Podcast, the show where we flip the script on traditional business thinking and prove that when you put people first, profits follow. I'm Sandra Coker, your guide on this journey to more engaged teams, loyal customers, and a healthier bottom line. These episodes are brought to you by Human Power Solutions, helping organizations unlock the human potential that powers performance. Whether you're a leader, an HR pro, or a curious change maker, buckle up. We're diving into fresh stories, real-world strategies, and a few laughs along the way. Ready to turn your workplace into a profit-powered people machine? Let's get started. Welcome to the People Profit Podcast. I'm Sandra Coker, and I am your host for today. Our guest this afternoon is Jenny Reyes. Jenny owns the company called Your Brand Story. She is an incredible marketing brand ambassador who started her career at Dove and has gone on to start her own company where she helps businesses with their marketing and brand awareness through so many different channels. Jenny also works with something called the Working Genius, and it's from Patrick Lencioni of the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And the Working Genius really helps leaders to understand how they can get their employees to be working in their genius zone, or zone of genius, as she calls it. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I look forward to hearing your comments and your thoughts after the show. Welcome to the podcast, Jenny. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you. And I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. So first, I'd love you to tell the audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why leadership is it's such an important topic for you and teams.
Right. Well, and so my background I've been doing what I've been doing, which is really in branding and marketing. It started there. I've been in it for about 2 decades now. And one of the notable things 2 decades ago, I want to say once upon a time, was when I was a part of the team that did a launch for Dove's campaign for Real Beauty. So that was one of the things that I was involved in, or the campaigns that I was involved in. And I'm grateful that it's still alive and well today, right? And it's evolved. But even back then in a corporate role, I was, the brand manager of Dove in my area, and working with a lot of different people and teams. And so, being able to have that journey of, one, leading a team, being able to get them to do what you wanted to do, because it's not just about the marketing piece. It's also, the salespeople, the trade marketing, and then the product. Do we have enough of the product, right? And you're working with so many people, and then having to convince upper management to be able to say, we need to launch by this date, and this is the press around it, and by the way, you have to spend this money to support,
right.
Because it's their money, not mine.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where my journey had begun, and it just so happened that I was also newly married at the time.
Yeah.
But because it was such a big project, I wasn't really seeing a lot of my husband. And so the joke was either I was working too much or he was sleeping too much. Because every time I would come home, he was asleep, and I would leave the next day still asleep. So it was really then when, I said, I think it's time to try something different, and realized that there was a gap in everything that we were doing in terms of brand management, where as a brand manager, I was looking to agencies to help with the creatives, but then they were a little bit lacking on the implementation. And on the other side, you have people that can implement really well, like take note of all the details and all those things, but then they needed a bigger vision. Like there was always that balance that was missing. And as the brand manager that was kind of in between, I realized, that's something that we can provide for other businesses and entrepreneurs and companies. So that's when Your Brand Story was essentially born. And as I look back now, back then it was like, let's just do the next best thing that can help, put food on the table and but in a way it was, it was a leadership journey. Like if you look back at it, it was like, oh, I have to lead myself here. I have to be able to advocate for what it is that I'm doing, or sell my service, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then if there was an event that we were doing, then it's who are the people that we need to partner with so that they're bought into the vision. And then, that we're able to carry this through. And this position that I somehow have put myself in, now people call me an integrator. And people call me as somebody that's a brand integrator, where I work with visionaries and entrepreneurs and small businesses to bring their brand to life. And I also work with the other side of it, where I have the people who can do the SEO and the websites and the social media. So I somehow have been a general contractor / and without, people say, well, you're the middle person, but there's a lot of, I want to say, leadership characteristics that have to come with that, because then again, you're working both ways, both channels, up, down, and sideways, right?
So going back to your corporate journey, right? So you started off in corporate, you were leading a team, and then you had to kind of like manage up as well and understand what that is.
Yes.
And then you got to then you took on the entrepreneur role, which so many of us fall into that role, and we're like, oh, this is going to be so fun. And it can be a challenge. It is about putting food on the table in the beginning, right?
Yes.
How is that, having a budget, having all those things, that people underneath you, or people working with you, how did you learn how to lead yourself when you didn't have that infrastructure behind you?
Yeah. To be completely honest, in the beginning, it was really a trial and error phase, right? It was like, oh, let's try this. Oh boy, that was a waste of my time and
money.
Now, right? but a lot of it is like trusting yourself and learning, okay, is this the best way, right? And a part of it also was finding people who I could look up to and learn from. And I think now they call it, finding the mentor or the coach, or, a group of people that you can ask this advice from, which is why I also love masterminds so much, because it's like your own board of directors without really having to seek a board of directors every month. Yes. But back then, and I think now, as we talk about it, I'm sure you've done it as well. It's all these years of experience. Oh yeah, now I know a little bit better. But back then it was really let me try this, or let me ask this person, and then learning to say, I think this is it, and then not following it and learning, oh, I should have listened to myself, or actually listening to myself, and then going, oh, it actually worked. Phew, let's try that again and let's do it better, But yeah, it was a lot of learning along the way.
And really understanding yourself and your instincts. I know when this is my third-ish business, I guess you could say, and, been through a lot of different, have had a brick and mortar, done home, all that stuff. And, I feel like you learn a lot about yourself as you go through the journey, and you learn from all of those mistakes. And, I think that self-awareness of who you are and learning who you are throughout the journey is pretty big. And you talk that, you talk about everyone should have their own brand of leadership, right? Yeah. How do you help people uncover what that brand truly is? Especially them, like if you think about the younger leaders, they may not see themselves as leaders.
Right.
How do you help them do that?
Well, one is, of course, you said it, self-awareness and understanding yourself. And there are a whole bunch of tools and assessments now that are out there. And a couple of them I know I've certified in, starting again with selfish reasons, right? And just trying to say, okay, why is it that this task or this part of the job, while I know I can do it, it just feels like it's draining all my energy. But all of this, like I can do all day. And trying to understand, when I look, let's say, at yourself or somebody else that I've met, it's like, well, she can do that. How come I can't? And how come but it looks like you can keep going. And I'm just like, but it doesn't light me up, And so having that understanding, and so I did go and research a lot more. And one of the tools that I certified in is called Working Genius. And it's by Patrick Lencioni. And he's somebody I discovered over the pandemic. They just developed this whole tool, and they call it a productivity tool. It's not necessarily a personality tool, where every job is like what they call a 6-letter job, and every team is a 6-letter team, where you have people that are in the ideation stage, that they can do that all day. Like you live and work in that zone. But then you pass it on to people like myself, who are pretty much in the activation stage, where I love to ask all the questions, try to make sense of connecting the dots, and then saying, okay, how can we make this work, and how do we bring this to life? And then you have the people on the implementation stage, that is their zone of genius, where once they're given a task, they can execute to the T, and you don't have to worry if this link is connected or this ad is running here. I mean, if I did that all day, I would be like, I'm tired, I'm done, this is not.
Yeah.
You're the same.
Oh, yeah. Well, so I thank you for sending me the link, because I took the Working Genius, and obviously for the people that know me out there, I love ideas. I love thinking big, and, kind of gathering the team together to get it done. And I find that a lot of leaders will hire someone for positions and not understand, the person that applied for the job may not understand their working genius, and the leader doesn't. And there's just this disconnect, right? And I love Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Yes.
He's probably one of my favorites. I love how he writes, his storytelling, but the brilliance of how he thinks about bringing a group of people together to execute on an idea.
Yes.
The thought that your working group is your family. No, your colleagues. Your colleagues, and
Absolutely.
you bring strangers together. So
right.
Yeah.
And it starts with you as a leader understanding that, right? But then also understanding, okay, I don't love this. I don't need to love it to be able to get it done. I also talk about having a team to build your dream, and we're not meant to do things alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing that this is not something that I love to do or it lights me up, but giving it to somebody that does, and partnering with somebody that can complement you there, kind of makes it more efficient and more effective overall. And then everybody's happier. Everybody, works well together. Everybody knows their role. There's no guilt. There's no shame. Well, at least that's the goal.
That's the goal.
There's no guilt. There's no shame.
I don't know. I'm an Irish girl. There's a lot of guilt going on with those Irish Catholics,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
But you think about life and leadership can be pretty messy, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in a job that's not working for you, or you're on your own and you have to do all of the tasks, right? And then life is kind of coming at you at all these directions, right? So when you talk about embracing the messy middle, what does that look like in a real world scenario? Like, let's look at it from an entrepreneur, from someone who's in a company, to someone who's building a business with a couple of employees. Let's look at it a couple of different ways.
Well, in general, everybody sees the end goal, right? It's like, oh, she's on a stage. Oh, she's grown her business 10x. Oh, he's done this. But to the journey from where you were to where you want to be, it's not a very smooth ride. And if I think of my transition out of like corporate, really big, fast-moving consumer goods industry, where I was working with 50 people all day, to then just being myself. And what am I going to do today to make sure that this works out, right? And then, of course, I eventually had children, and we, moved states, we moved countries. All of that is not a smooth transition. Nobody really sees like the kids that wake up in the middle of the night, and the next day you have a presentation that you still need to finish. Or the client that I was supposed to meet but couldn't because my daughter was having a little bit of a panic attack in the pandemic. And it was like, where do I go, right? Or how do I make this happen? But at the end of the day, it's, always saying to yourself, well, what are my values? And as an entrepreneur, even as a business person, it's like, what is it that I believe in and that I prescribe to? And I know that family comes first. And I say that to my clients now as well. It's like, I'm a mom first, just letting you know, the minute my kid calls, it's like, okay, you're on pause because I'm going to attend to them. And that kind of becomes like the guiding light and the North Star for anybody in an employee role. If your integrity is compromised, you start doing things. But if you're working with people that you like and that have the same values as you do, then it's so much easier to wake up and come to work all day and do your job and give the best of yourself, right? So I think that might have kind of spanned both the
it did. I love how you said that, because it's like people, they don't understand the sleepless nights, the the constant, like, I have $1,000 in my bank account and that's all. I don't know where the next thousands coming from to pay the mortgage, all of those things. So when you're talking to your companies and you're helping them with their branding, because that's such a key to growing your business, right? How do you help people kind of get through the chaos of that?
I mean, we go back to, I always start with the values. I just go back to, well, what's important to you, right? And what are we trying to do here? A lot of it, branding takes time to build. Like, if you think of the brands that we know now, they weren't there yesterday. They were there a few years ago. Like, I always talk about Apple because I built my business on Macs.
Yeah.
And for me now, it's a no-brainer. If my Mac starts to conk out, I'm back at the Apple store. But it takes a while to get to that point. And so it's almost like, okay, having that vision, how do we get there? What are the steps? Understanding our values and what's important. And then picking one or two things that you can focus on, because you will, always building a company, building a brand, building a business, even building a team, there's an investment, a certain level of investment that you're willing to put out there. And it's holding that and making sure that you can carry it for a certain amount of time so that you can eventually see and reap the benefits later on.
Yeah. So thinking about, I think, I really think about the young leaders coming up, the Gen Zers who are coming up. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm like buckle up, buttercup, just go for it. Right. And I feel like that the Gen Z coming up, they're super compassionate and empathetic and all of that, but they don't like a lot of like disorder or chaos, right? Yeah. So how do you help them become the leaders that can make, like, how would the Working Genius help them be better leaders?
Well, I guess that one of the things is understanding why. Why don't you like chaos is everywhere, and there's only so little that we can control. And another book, Sandra, if you don't mind me mentioning Mel Robbins, I've just
oh my God, I love her.
This whole let them theory, I was like, why wasn't it out sooner? But it's there, it's everywhere. Just getting that clarity for yourself first, and then taking that next step and being brave and bold enough to take that next step, because then the chaos won't always stay there. It's only as much as you would let it. And then surrounding yourself, I believe, with people that can support you and hold your vision. And, there's always going to be a naysayer and somebody that says, oh, somebody's done that before. That doesn't work, right? But finding those people that will say, okay, I don't understand, but I trust and I support you no matter what, is helpful. And it doesn't have to be a family member. It could be a friend. It could be a mentor, a colleague, somebody that has similar values. I always just go back to the values. And then understanding yourself, like, okay, this is where I know this lights me up. Like the Working Genius, if I just go back to it a little bit, there are six geniuses is what they call zones of genius. A W, which is your wonder, your I is your invention, D is discernment, and then G is galvanizing, and then E is enablement, and T is tenacity. And the wonder and invention, as we talked about, as the ideation stages, discernment and galvanizing are in the activation stages, and then the enablement and tenacity are in the implementation stages, right? So each person generally has we have all six, but we have two geniuses, 2 competencies, and 2 frustrations. That's pretty much the thesis of the book. Patrick Lencioni does a better job explaining it, but in a 30-second nutshell, that's where we're at. And you can be in any part of that, but the idea is for you to be able to keep on going is you want to stay in your zones of genius. And so if somebody who is in a chaotic situation finds themselves living in their frustrations, like for example, mine would probably be tenacity and wonder, which I believe you and I have similar frustrations. If all I did was wonder about what might be, what could be a good idea, if every day that's all you came to me with and you told me, you need to make sure that the links work, the spell check is good, all those things, I would probably quit after 3 days. Because if that's all I did 8 hours a day, I'd be like, what kind of a job is this? But if you put me where my zone of genius is, which is the discernment and the enablement piece, and I'm talking to people, figuring out like what's the best idea, and then seeing through, what it is that will make this work and who you could put into, which is how I operate with my own company. Then I can do it all day. And I can go one client after the other and help them, support them that way. And so I think that would be something for our new leaders as they're trying to understand themselves and then understanding the system so that they can understand who they can tap.
In the team. So let's talk about that for a minute though, because, we use tools like DISC as you do as well, DISC, Working Genius, Predictive Index, whatever that is, right? And how do you ensure, this is the challenge that I think that a lot of people have, like we'll go in and say, it's not all of who you are. Like we're not labeling you as that, right? People struggle with that sometimes and they feel like it's a labeling exercise versus something that can be empowering. How do you describe that?
I agree with it's not a label. It's really, it's not a test, which is why you never call it a test. I remember we had that challenge with a group I was working with, like anybody that says test, you put $1 in the jar and that's going to be what we use to eat lunch. Because, eventually people stop saying it. It's an assessment. It's there for you, first and foremost, to understand who you are, right? And then to understand the language that you can use within the team. And so it's not to say, like, again, if I go back even to my example, if I had to spell check and check links and do these things, it's not like I can't do it. I do it, especially let's say we're already at the last hour and we need this out. I would do it. But it's again, do I have to do it all day? Right. And so understanding that and knowing, of course I can do it. I can build a website. I can create a Canva image. I can even talk to people and say, well, let's brainstorm and let's do all these other things. If I needed to, and so can you, and so can anybody else that, but knowing that, okay, I'll do this for this amount of time, then we'll pass it to somebody who loves doing it all day, or we'll move this down, to the next phase. And if you think about it that way, it's like, okay, well, one, as an entrepreneur, you know who it is that you're pulling in at certain times, right? If you're in a business and you're leading a team, that even helps with who you call in for meetings or when you have to manage up and manage down. Because let's say you're bringing in your boss and you're already trying to figure out, is it pink? Is it blue? And your boss is like, why am I here?
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't, then you're like, does he even know what he's doing? Or does she even know what she's talking about? But so it's understanding when to include certain people or how to even talk to certain people and explain things. It gives you like that common language. It helps mitigate conflict and miscommunication, as does understanding. It's just more understanding, and I think that's where everything stems from. Yeah,
I think that's interesting. That I think I've told the story maybe in another episode, but when you've got someone that maybe is on the phone all day long, like, a receptionist, someone at the front desk, and they're constantly answering the phone. Yeah. If they don't enjoy being on the phone or interacting with people and they're in that position, Monday they're in good shape because they're coming off the weekend. Tuesday they're okay. By Wednesday they're a little bit irritable, and Friday is, they're miserable, right? And I where I talk a lot to our clients, and I'm sure you do too, it zaps your energy. Like if I had spent, like you were saying, if I had spent all day doing the reports that we have to do,
Yeah.
you know, but if I have to go out to like 4 networking meetings or, you know, meet with clients like all day, by Friday, I'm like, yeah, that was such a great week, you know?
Yeah.
But you're right. It's figuring that out. I think, but when you're when you're newer into the workforce and you're coming up in the ranks, a lot of times, you know, I feel like they're kind of conforming to what they think the expectation is.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, especially if you have just, climbed up, right? You've just been promoted or you've just inherited this position. You did it out of merit. You got noticed because you did something right. And then it's almost as if you're caught in this pattern of, well, I've got to do it again. I've got to make sure everything works well. You have to make sure that nothing goes wrong and the team is performing. And then you take on a lot more, right? A lot more pressure. But then that understanding of, okay, now my performance actually is based on, let's say, the team that I'm leading, and it's not on my own sole performance. And so being able to see that quickly, I think somebody had a book as well, and they called it making the unconscious incompetence conscious faster.
Gotcha.
Because you don't know what you don't know, but the sooner that you're able to, then it helps everything run smoothly. And then you have a better purview of what it is that you need to let go of and then start learning, so that you can climb the next rung of the ladder, right? And so a lot of it is just asking some of these questions or being open and vulnerable enough to say like, hey, let's say I came from marketing, but now I'm running a team that needs some finance.
Right.
I'm not quite sure what happens in finance.
Yeah.
So pull in your finance partner and just go, okay, tell me what I need to know. Let me ask all these questions, no matter how simple or stupid, or, there's no stupid question. It's a question that's never asked. And then understand that and say, okay, I might lean on you a little bit, but eventually you start to understand more and gain that experience. But having to be vulnerable and open to do that is where it starts. And I mean, I thought back to your question about chaos. Well, it might feel chaotic that way, but as you start doing that, it starts to get a little bit calmer and clearer, and the chaos is more managed. And you don't bring that home, and you don't feel like you're just overwhelmed and underwater all the time. So it is about using your team.
And that is huge. I mean, because everything that happens at work happens, does affect the home life, and that's super important, and vice versa, right? And when you think about like emotional intelligence for these leaders, and can you give an example of when emotional intelligence made a measurable difference in a team or a project? So I'd love to hear an example of.
I mean, we say leaders control the weather in the team, and you have a leader that's very self-aware and self-regulated as well. Like I remember being in this team where the leader was all about making sure that the tasks were all done. Like they were very task oriented and very high in terms of but then it just so happened that they were also, because they wanted all the T's crossed and the I's dotted, that they were micromanaging their team. And not everybody on the team likes the micromanagement. And when it came to let's say a fun bonding activity, it was, I think, a bowling activity. I remember this in a group setting, and once they understood each other, and this person who was all about the fun and not necessarily about just the task, we're like, well, bowling shouldn't have been a task, was what she had said. And she was like, I just felt pressured that I had to to strike a ball. And I think she buckled, and she thankfully had enough courage later on to give that feedback to her leader. And he was like, well, yeah, I realized I kind of made it more about winning and rolling it a certain angle. And I was like, this is bowling, we're talking about people, but see how it kind of plays into, this whole team dynamic. And so her being aware of who her leader was and herself made a difference in that moment when, we were talking about it. And so, yeah, and vice versa. And he was aware, like, oh, not everybody is as task detailed or as I am. I maybe should approach this a different way. And I was like, just also remember it's bowling. But yes.
Running a business is hard. Developing your people shouldn't be. At Human Power Solutions, we act as your outsourced chief learning officer, designing custom learning and development experiences that actually move the needle. No fluff, no cookie cutter workshops, just results. Whether your people need better communication, stronger leadership, or less burnout, we provide strategic solutions that align with your goals and keep your team moving forward. Visit hpowersolutions.com and unlock your team's full potential without disrupting operations.
EQ, whatever you want to call it, it is the most underrated skill. And why do you think that most leaders, or a lot of leaders, don't value it as much as they should?
Yeah, and I feel like we as a Generation X, we grew up saying that showing your emotion is soft, right? It's not something that you can wear on your sleeve. But the newer generation of leaders, they're a little bit more open.
Yeah.
And vulnerability and sensitivity is now seen as a superpower and a strength, which is awesome, I think, because then at least you're showing your true colors a little bit more.
Yeah.
And there's no what do you call it, like hiding, or there's no putting up all these layers.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, you just show who you are, which is how we're all supposed to be. And there's a little bit more of a blending of this life and business. Before it was, we had to separate ourselves. When you go to work, put this hat on, and when you leave, you're a different person. But now that blending is coming together a little bit more, and it's more prominent, which is, again, a big cultural shift for people in the Gen X and above, the baby boomers.
It's a tough one. I think, a lot of my high school friends, we're all still friends. We're leaders of companies or divisions or whatever. And it's just, the hardcore, just work a million hours a week, work a lot of hours a day. And, and I still do. Musemi and I, like, we're in a different time zone, and I'll text him at 10 o'clock at night. It's like, I'm like, what are you doing up? He's like, what are you doing up? And his time zone, right? But, this generation, and I have kids who are Gen Zs. I've got I think I have a millennial and a Gen Z, and both are climbing up the corporate ladder right now, both doing very well. And it's really interesting, the questions that they have and the expectations that they have of their organization.
Right.
One of the things that, my younger one will be a manager or a leader next year, and I was talking about the team, right? An effective team is better than being an effective leader, right? Yes. So what's one way that you can talk about or talk to these leaders where you can go shift from being like, I'm the hero, I've got it all done, to being just the builder of that team? Right.
Well, it does definitely still start with each and every person, and the ability to want to know and understand. Because there's a group I do work with now. Every time we start these workshops that it's like, what are opportunities and challenges? And they're all new leaders. And, and they tend to say, well, it's really about this generational gap. We have people on our team, and they're the leader, they're the manager of the team, that have been in the company, and they've been, they're Gen X and baby boomers. And the ones that are easier to work with are willing to learn from them, and they are willing to learn as well, right? So it's kind of that respect, which most of us are looking for. It's like, I respect your experience, I respect this. Let me share with you how it is it's done these days. And then now it's a meeting in the middle. And having those conversations and open communication, because that's where every conflict will start, is the misunderstanding, the misperception, But a clear communication will help clean all of that up, and just being open and being able to trust. I think when we talk about leadership, it's not necessarily the position, but the ability to build that relationship and that trust with people, knowing that you've got their back, they have yours, and that can span generational gaps as well. So hopefully that helped.
Yeah. The premise of People Profit is, being able to create that culture internally so that your company will be more profitable, right? So everything that happens, your processes, your relationships, and everything that goes on within your company affects your client, your customer. That's what really grows your business is the internal structure. Yeah. And, I think about a lot of times where we're trying to, balance our personal fulfillment with our business performance, and we're working across generations. Yeah. And, some of us or some people, their business performance is what drives their personal life, and others it's their personal life drives how well they do in business. And how do you help people kind of navigate through that piece?
It's generally, understanding, again, going back, I mean, we can't say it enough, the values.
Yeah.
Right? What is it that you value? And it's okay if what you value is the business and the profit and the money. Just understand that the people that you hire, if they don't value the same thing, will probably not help drive your vision, or will not subscribe to it. And it'll be a little bit of a harder blend and mix. Somebody's going to compromise, and at the end of the day, it's like, well, what is it that we really want to do here, right? It just brings it back to those essential questions. Yeah. And just asking and having some of those hard questions and hard conversations. We were talking earlier a little bit about a person that was probably in the wrong role. Well, that's a conversation that has to happen. I mean, ideally sooner than later, because then it affects everybody's performance. It affects the whole culture of the team. And it affects the organization as a whole, because you are, building this brand from within. And it's like, what do you want to be known for? Who are the people that can help you and will agree to create this brand and this type of leadership, moving forward? Yeah.
And we talk a little bit about the people learning from each other, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say technology is moving at the speed of light. Yeah. And I think that the generation, the more mature generation, people have been in these roles for a long time, have a little bit of fear of that. And so advice to being okay with talking to someone maybe that's really into it, maybe loves the technology, grew up with the technology.
Yes.
And kind of talking back to that generation of leaders, how do you help them to kind of like let go of your ego, go ask for some help?
Right. Well, the first thing I suppose is to recognize that you do have that ego and that fear, right? Mm-hmm. And congratulations if you do, because then it's like, okay, now you can move past it. It's like, I know I'm afraid of this. And I remember saying that even to my own kid, because we talk about, putting certain things on social media and this, and I look at her and I say, well, okay, that scares me a little bit. Yeah. Be human for her. And then she says, and that's a classic example. She's like, Mom, come on, you're overreacting. It's fine. Yeah. And and then it's up to me to be like, okay, let's try it. Right. Mm-hmm. And there are certain things that if you just have to be open to trying. Again, if it's out of your comfort zone, it's the only way we grow. And it's both. It goes both ways. So me being open to all of this AI and rapid technology and all that, and going, I'm a little scared. I'm a little hesitant. But okay, if you're willing to, let's try. Yeah. But also for the younger generation to be like, I know this a little bit more, and subscribing to what their fears are. It's not just not acknowledging it, because they might not understand it as well. They're like, well, why are you afraid? It's what everybody's doing. Come on now, and it doesn't really acknowledge and respect that fear and that experience. So I always say it goes both ways.
The empathy, right? It's the empathy both ways. Yes. And that's another skill that we could talk about all day long. or the lack thereof. And I hear myself sometimes when I'm talking, I'm like, there's no empathy coming out of your voice at all. And I recognize it later on when I go home to my husband and I'm like, I just wasn't the nicest person today. And he's like, what do you mean?
But that's a good, that's again something for you because you recognize it, and that's not many people will. And that's kind of the hope of why we do what we all do, is like you start to, have more people recognize, oh, they're probably not seeing it from the lens that I'm seeing it, even if this is how I mean for it to come out, right?
Yeah.
And being able to come back around and say, I'm sure, like, look, I'm sorry, yesterday was a little bit of a tough day. It's happened to me when I work with somebody, and thankfully I'm a little bit also more aware, and it's like, oh, this person, this is how he communicates.
Yeah.
Because then the next day he comes back and he says, hey, I didn't mean to be, very harsh or this, and I didn't see it that way, but I was like, oh, because I understood,
right.
the things that he was coming at from. So, yeah.
So I'd love to tell you. It's yeah. So you originally took this training for personal reasons.
Yes.
So what has been the most surprising outcome for you for that decision?
I believe it's, when I first took DISC, it was really because I wanted to make sure my husband and I had better communication.
Interesting.
And it was because we were home a lot. He's out, working, and I have my own business. But during the pandemic, everybody was home, and we just couldn't run away from each other, right? We get along in general, but there are still those moments where it's like, did he understand what I said, or what did I say that was wrong? And I was questioning myself, right? And so, one of the surprising things that came out was that we are actually opposite. And that whole saying of opposites attract, it is true, right? Because it's something that's in you that maybe the other person doesn't have, or it complements who you are. However, the flip side of that is a lot more misunderstanding can happen. And a classic example that I like to use is, I'll come home, or he'll come home, and I'll say, hey, once upon a time, this is what happened. And because that's how I like to storytell, where I go from point A to point point 1 to point B to like all the way, before I get to the actual point. So I'm in the middle of it, and he walks in and he says, so what's your point? Right? Oh. And again, as you can imagine, like little me is just like, oh my gosh, he doesn't care. But in his mind, and we've of course worked through this now, but in his mind, it's like, I just want to hear what it is so I can just enjoy the story. And he's like, why are you upset? And it's such a classic example. But once I did DISC and I saw that, I don't open with once upon a time anymore. It's more of like, hey, I did this today. And he's like, oh, really? Okay, tell me more. But at the same time, he also knows that I'm a once upon a time person. And so it helps him kind of adjust as well. And so I always like to do like the sandwich where you are understanding the other person more. I think that was the most surprising thing, which works well in any situation, especially if you're dealing with different personalities, in the workplace, as a partner, on a team, in your business, all of that. So
it really brings us back to that self-awareness. How we opened up our conversations, like, how are you? I'm a very big picture. I'm a high I on the DISC scale. Come down quite a bit since owning the business, and you have to sometimes. Right. And not super detail oriented. You become that as you grow in your career, but that self-awareness to help you communicate with others and understand how they communicate. It's all pretty well tied together. Yes. And I'm fascinated because you have such a rich journey, right? Dove, that's like, I have Dove in my shower, So you launched that beauty campaign that is still going today, right? Starting your own business. What lessons would you have for someone, going from that big brand storytelling? So that you're going out to the masses, and how does that shape your business today and your leadership, or your approach to leadership today?
I guess in terms of like advice, that is.
Well, how was it? How do you feel kind of coming out of that? And
Well, now I feel better, right? Back then, the first few years, there was a lot of, what am I doing? Should I be doing this? And really, what is this for, right? And it was a lot of just, again, self reflection. But thankfully, having people that I could lean on that said, "Oh, you've got this," and having that support. And I feel like surrounding yourself with those types of people, and finding people in similar spaces. Because before me, I think the other entrepreneur in my family was my grandfather, and by the time I jumped into this, he had already passed. And so I had a lot of people in the corporate space that while they might have been supportive, didn't really, share, or couldn't share as much. And so it was like, who are the other entrepreneurs? Who are the people that have done this? And I even found a mentor that I would talk to and ask my questions. And it's not to say I didn't respect the people around me. They just had a different lens.
Yeah.
But recognizing that, and then really putting myself in these other spaces. And then when we moved to California, and then the pandemic happened, it was like, okay, who can I talk to? Who can I learn from? And then putting myself in these masterminds and always just seeking something new all the time, just so that I could also grow. Like, what do I need now? And I think that's just a constant in the journey. It just might look different, but like, that's the question I ask myself almost every year, or every half year. It's like, okay, where am I now? And what do I need to take me to my next level? Because then, it'll change, right? As you keep growing and going and evolving, like you said, and who are the people that can help me get there quicker? I'm
thinking about the big brand, right?
Yes.
And then you work with different size businesses.
Yes. Yeah.
What principles apply to that big brand to these different size businesses that have as big?
I mean, one is it's like, we talked about data, like the big brands have enough, or the big companies have more money that you have to justify every move, right? We don't have that much in a smaller brand in terms of like extensive research. So there's a little bit of, well, what are some of the things that I know I can say I'm successful? What am I looking at? And just trying to help find that measurement that is quantifiable for you. So that's a good lesson to take. Some of these big companies, it doesn't have to be thousands of dollars in research, but like just having those metrics so you can measure yourself against. It's not a bad thing to measure. It's just saying, did I make it? Did I not? If I did, great. What did I do right that I can repeat? And if I didn't, okay, so what did I do wrong and what can I do differently next time? And that's really just how you want to look at it, and not really like, oh shoot, I didn't do it. I failed.
So the principles are basically the same. It's just the budgets are different, and
the budgets are different.
The approaches are a little bit different. That's awesome. I want to ask you a little bit about, I'm sure right now you're working with different companies. They've got hybrid teams. There's some burnout that's going on right now. Some people like have that purpose-driven work. What leadership practices do you believe are non-negotiable right now?
Leadership practices that are non-negotiable. And communication. I think that is super key. Communication, open, honest communication both ways.
Yeah.
And I remember a discussion we had was, a feedback loop. Like sometimes it's not about critiquing the person, but allowing this other person to, actually share what's happening. Because like you said, life and business, now they're merging a little bit more. And so you don't know, maybe this person, while somebody said was really good at work, just showed up, they were having a crappy day at home, like, a pet died or something. Right. So having that open and honest communication and setting those expectations, I feel are key. Like, here's how I expect to show up. And I remember when we first started our business and we were building, I had a business partner when we started Your Brand Story, and we were hiring people and building a team. So we were at some point a team of 7. And we said, look, this is how, we're both new moms. We trust that you will work and do the work that's needed for the client. And if you do that in 3 days or 4 days, take the 5th day off. That's not a problem. That's how we wanted to set our culture. But of course, if the work starts to pile up and we see that it's not happening, then we expect you here for 5 days a week, making sure that that's clear and then holding by it, and we would say you'd have, 10, 15 days leave, whatever it is was the norm back then, plus your birthday is a birthday leave, something like that. So being able to leaders set the weather, they also dictate the culture of how it's going to be. And we really wanted to make sure that we lived our lives and allowed our people to live their lives so that they could come to work and be happy there and do their best. So I think those are some of the non-negotiables that you would.
I would agree with that. And again, the clients are the ones that win. Your clients win, and then your business booms. It's really amazing. And when you think about we're being pulled in a million different directions as leaders, and this new, well, at least for me, because of my personality and my working genius, the next shiny object, I'm like, well, let's go for that. Let's go for that. I see my producer cracking up right now because he knows that.
You will always have a million good ideas, Sandra. I think that is your personality type. Yeah.
So how do you help leaders kind of let's get focused and stay aligned and, aligned with their why.
Right.
And look at those shiny new objects and say, do I really want to grab for that?
Yeah, I feel like, one, for you, it's great that you're aware that you have that, right?
Oh, yeah.
But you also have people that are not like that on your team. Yes. And I feel like that is the best support for somebody like a leader like yourself. Like I know that I attract certain people and certain clients who are like that. Like every day I get this phone call. I've got a new idea. Let's do this. And I always say, great, but let's focus. What if we focused on this? Because I know that my zone of genius is in discernment, and I can filter all these great ideas. And say, okay, if you did this, here are the pros and cons, or if you did this, is this what you're going for? And kind of bringing it back. So having somebody that can do that with you and for you without making you feel like, like you're not doing in your zone of genius, but that the whole idea is that it's a compliment to you. And then you have that discipline as well to say, okay, let's stick given what we have in this budget. And then it becomes your choice too. And that's what I always tell my clients. It's like, we can do these 3 things, but I think you just have to pick which one we want to start with first. And then we keep going. And I feel like that's been helpful in our relationship too, because now they know they can trust me to not just do what they say, but actually even present or reflect back and go, are you sure you want to do that? It's a great idea, but maybe not right now. And
you're really consulting. You're really helping them and being their chief learning or the chief marketing officer, kind of that role. I heard a lot of really cool things today from our conversation. And I want to kind of so for leaders, regardless of where you are, it's self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and really knowing where your working genius is. Where is your zone, right?
Yes.
But the other thing that I really was so important to me, which is something that I've done my entire career without really even knowing it, was having a mentor or having someone that you could bounce ideas off of that isn't going to judge you. And I love that. I hope that everyone that's listening today heard that. Yes. My mentors have been always outside of my work, outside of my company. They've always been people that are not invested in where I was. So they could just focus on me. What about for you? What are some final thoughts from this conversation? I know we talked about a lot of things. What's something you might want to share with the audience?
Yeah. And I feel like, learning to trust yourself. And listen internally too. It's great that to have we talked about support and having the mentor, which is awesome. They are there to provide that other outside perspective. And so I love what you said, because my mentors as well are outside of they're not invested in my business. they're just there that I can call them and talk about what's happening, and they'll provide that perspective. But at the end of the day, it's really being able to trust yourself to know and do and try. It takes some practice, because at first, it's almost like that inner wisdom that you just start to ignore because the whole world is doing it this way. But
Yeah.
you kind of know better sometimes. Most of the time you do. And
Yeah.
it's okay, I'm willing to make that courageous step to try it, even if it is different from what everybody else is doing, because they say that nobody has the same vision as you, and you're the only one that carries it. So, you've got to take that courageous step to make that happen. And so I think that's one thing that, we can also hopefully get people to take away, especially these new leaders.
I love it. I love it. Oh, so I know that people will want to reach out to you and talk with you. Working Genius, marketing, all the things that you do with the teams. So Jenny, what's the best way that people can get in touch with you?
So my email, I think you see it on your screen. That's my website, yourbrandstory.co. My Instagram, my LinkedIn, and my email are all pretty much that. It's jenny@yourbrandstory.co, as in company, not .com.
Yep. Yeah.
And I'm happy to talk to anybody that would love to reach out. So, but
That's
thank
great.
you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And anyone out there that's listening that wants to do the Working Genius assessment, I highly, highly recommend it. It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
Jenny, thank you so much for joining us today. You just added such a great insights for our leaders today, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, take care. That's a wrap on this episode of the People Profit Podcast. If you found a nugget of wisdom or even just a spark of inspiration, share the love, subscribe, leave us a review, and pass the episode along to a colleague who's ready to build a people-first culture. Big thanks to our sponsor, Human Power Solutions, for championing workplace where humans thrive and profits rise. Want to learn how they can energize your team? Head over to hpowersolutions.com to get started. I'm Sandra Coker, reminding you that when you invest in people, you invest in profit. See you next time.